Well, hello, and welcome to E's Art Tips. This is my very first one, so I'm sure there's going to be some mistakes and things that I'm going to learn and get better at, but I'm going to try and walk you through making a thank you card for a friend. Now, I do these every summer. I have a lot of fun with them, and I hope people like getting them. So, a friend of mine recently made us some fantastic face masks, and I wanted to send her a thank you card. Well, she's also into the Mexican salamander. She actually has one as a pet. These are also called axolotls, if you can spell them. I'm not sure I can. Anyway, they're really cute, but I thought, how about an axolotl with a face mask? That'll be really fun. So the first thing I do when I'm going to do a card is I actually get the cards themselves. So these can be purchased at various craft stores. This one I got at Michael's. You can get them at stationery stores or online. And what they'll do is there'll be a lot of envelopes that will also come with cards. So here's the envelopes, and here's the cards. And you want ones that have a pre-fold in them already. You also want to get something that's a decent paper size, or a decent paper quality, actually. This one is pretty good for pen and ink. It's not so great for watercolor because it's got no tooth to it and it's a little bit on the thin side. It's basically a cardstock. Preferably, I like to get ones that are a watercolor texture of some sort with a little bit of texture to them, a little bit of tooth. But what I'll do is I'll keep this kind of to the side so that I can see about the size of what my drawing is going to need to be. And all my drawing pad is for me to do the rough. So this is where I figure out what I'm going to do. So my very favorite drawing tool is actually just a mechanical pencil. This is anything that you can get at a drugstore. It doesn't matter what kind you get. The big trick that I like to have is I like a 4B pencil lead, and you do have to look for those. Sometimes you can find them in the store, but more often than not, I actually have to buy them online. A 4B pencil lead is super soft and so much fun to work with, and you'll just get a wonderful result with it. All right, so the Mexican salamander has these cute little fringy things. I've actually got my laptop set up where you can't see it, but I can, and I'm looking at these little guys, and they're kind of like a little flat head. Now, since I always do things for kids, so I'm thinking kitty style. And then they have these little fringy things that come out from the sides. Really cute. They're kind of pinkish or white, depending. They have itty bitty little eyes and a little mouth. Of course, we're not going to see the mouth because we've got to put a face mask on it. They also have little itty bitty arms. Now, when you're drawing for kids, the proportions are oftentimes just two big circles. Looks like they've got kind of like humans where that thumb is on the wrong side. So this is the universal sign for namaste, which is how we all shake hands nowadays. So I'm going to say namaste, thank you for sending me this mask. And they got a little belly. Actually, they have funny little legs, and they've got a little tail. It's kind of looks like they can't swim very well. Maybe I'll have them just say thank you. So people often ask, how do you letter? So oftentimes you can start with the last letter where you want it, about right there, and the first letter about where you want it, and do little boxes. Also find the middle, T, H, A, and K, think. So your K is going to be in here, N, A, H, T. So we're probably not going to see a whole lot of this foot, so let's put them up that a little bit more. You can see this is super rough. That's all I need. All I'm doing right now is it's basically a life-size thumbnail. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to have to work with once I get to the paper of the card. So he's got his little mask. Does he have eyebrows? They don't have eyebrows in real life, but things always look happier, especially when you can't show the mouth, because the mouth isn't going to be visible. So you got to think, okay, what's he look like without his mouth? Does he still look happy? So something that's happening on right here is something that you really need to pay attention to when you're drawing. It's called overlap. Things, when they overlap, you've got dimension to them. So the arm has to have dimension. Okay, so you've got to make sure that you've got that extra shape going in. All right, so I've got my design figured out, and now I'm going to go to my card, and just for the sake of space, I'm going to go ahead and fold it over and figure this out. So I figured out my dimensions are about, here's the head, here's the body, and you can still see this is still basically a number 8. And those are the kitty dimensions, right? It's also like the bowling pins in a bowling alley, those things you knock over. You can kind of see how that would be a bowling pin. That's about the proportions of a kid. And I'm going to have a whole lot of negative space at the top, which I'm always yelling at my students about. No negative space. Do not let negative space rule you. So I'm going to bring it up a little bit. And you can see I'm still have a whole ton of sketchiness going on at this stage. But I'm basically going by the drawing that I did. Okay. And let's go ahead and get his little namaste in there. The trick when you're doing this is trying to maintain the energy from the initial sketch. A lot of people think that when you go in and try to do a secondary or tighter version of something, it tends to lose the energy of the original that you've done, and that can happen. So you've got to make sure that that doesn't happen. So here's this little footy coming around, and they love to swim. They're aquatic creatures underwater. So maybe we have some bubbles. You can see I'm not even drawing on a flat surface here. It's really rough. So here's my thank you. Here's my K. I don't want it to go any farther down than that because when you're thinking about how you balance things on the page, you want about the same amount of space up here as you've got down here. You can see I'm already starting to get a little bit tight if my thank you is coming down here. Now, if you have to have more space on one side or the other, you can have more space at the top than at the bottom because you can think that if this has weight, it's going to be crushing down, with gravity, it's coming down. So technically it would be squishing this space. So you can have less space at the bottom and at the top, but you still need to have a nice amount of space. You can see I don't have anything here, I don't have anything here. It's nice and framed, so that's a nice composition on the page. Here's my A, so there's my middle letter, and you can see I oftentimes will go with the middle letter, figure out where the ends are. Think. Now I know where it is. Here. Okay, so he's a little bit fatter than these guys, and he's a little fringier. He's even fringy right up here because these things have fringe. These are really weird looking little dudes. Kind of fun. Some of them are pink, flat out pink. How in the world does that exist in the world? That's so cool. Alright. And we could do a little bit of surround. They like little grasses and stuff like that, so maybe we'll do some little grasses just to add some variation. That's kind of cute. Got little pebbles in the bottom, maybe. Alright, so there's my rough. That's what I'm going to work with. I think that works. Actually, that face is looking cute. Alright, now I'm drawing this at an angle, obviously, so I'm going to look at it straight on for myself real quick just to make sure that I've got everything where I need it to be. And, a lot of people will have a lean when they draw. They lean to the right or they lean to the left, so a way to avoid that is look at it in the mirror. That's a great way to figure it out. So once I've got my sketch down, that's really all I need. And the next thing that I move up to, this is my little art case, is my pens. Now I love microns. I have all kinds of fun toys in here. That's a watercolor kit. These are one of those brush pens. These are really cool. Those take a lot of practice to get good at. Here's a number 2 micron. That's probably a really nice size. I hope it's got some juice to it. That's probably what we're going to use. And here is a number 3. That's also a good one. And maybe I have a number 1. Yes, I do. Look at that. There's number 1. All right, so those are my good tools. That will work for me. So now we're going to just draw him in. And honestly, the number 2 is probably a nice even thing to do. So we'll do the number 2. And I'm going to start with this little mask so that I make sure I'm compensating for it everywhere. I'm still taking a lot of liberties, so I didn't work everything out with my sketch, obviously. I don't know if I talk to myself when I'm working or not, but I guess I gotta get in the practice of talking to you guys if I'm gonna do more of these. I do stick my tongue out. My husband is always making fun of me because I stick my tongue out when I'm working. Now, I am a geek for line quality. I worked at on Charlie Brown and Snoopy for many years at Buster Brown Apparel, and I didn't get to meet Charles Schultz, unfortunately. My working colleague did get to right before I started working there, so I was bummed about that. But um, Charles Schultz had a degenerative disease that made his hands shake. And so he had this gorgeous line quality that was really hard to reproduce. So it took drawing two lines next to each other and then filling them in to reproduce his line quality. I'm going to start at the bottom here. I don't want to run out of room for my top fingers. So after 6.5 years of working on Charles Schultz images, I love a beautiful line. And you're not seeing it yet, but that's going to come later, okay? But you have to consider the line. The line is not just the thing that holds the colors in place. A beautiful line is a beautiful thing. All right, my thank you. So I want some dimension to my thank you. So now I go in and I fatten them up. I love hand lettering. It's got an energy to it that regular fonts just are not going to have. So you can see why I was making so much room for all these things so I could make them nice and beefy. All right, and let's do some of the bubbles. Varying sizes, make it interesting. And a little highlight, those little guys, okay. And did we decide these are going to go with eyebrows? Eyebrows are fun. All right, we're going to do eyebrows. And a little bit of the grasses. Now grasses are fun because they're like ribbons, so they're going to change direction from time to time. There's a real quick way to draw grasses. I never want an even number. It's kind of like Zen or the Rule of Three, or Shakespearean, three-act play. You think about things like that. By making things odd, the person who is enjoying it, coming to it, completes the number and makes it even. And so it's very Zen to always have odd numbers. That's why when you're planting a landscape, you never plant an even number of bushes, because the person coming into the landscape completes the landscape. So that's my black and white, but of course you can see my pencil line is still showing. And I'm not done with my quality of my line quality either. So this is my magic rub eraser. These are just white plastic erasers. There's nothing to them. I've got about a dozen of them. They're fantastic. I'm giving the ink just a second to dry as well, but I'm going to start in places that I started drawing, and I'm just rubbing it really in little circles, partly so that if it is wet and tries to blur on me anywhere, I'm going to catch it before it's a big streak across the whole thing, and partly because I want to make sure that I get all of the ink off. So here we're going, and that was at the end there, so, and that's not moving at all, so that's probably pretty good. All nice and dry. So now I'm going down to the fat side, and I'm just going to the town on it, getting rid of my pencil line. What I don't have with me at the moment is one of my brushes. I actually love those brushes. I've got about a dozen of those too. Don't know why I didn't pull one out, because that's part of my basic drawing kit. And why do I need it? Because look at all that eraser stuff that's on there. So the way I'm going to get rid of it is off the side of the table and hitting it with my finger. I've made a mess. Oh well. All right, so there we are with the raw of the pen and ink. Well, now I'm going to go in with my thicker micron, which we got the 0.3. That's pretty good. And you got to think, okay, where's the light coming from on this? And yes, it's line art, but there's still going to be a light direction. So I'm thinking it's coming from above. It's an aquarium or something like that. So it's going to have shadows below. So my line quality is going to be thicker on the lower side. And I forgot to bring in the rest of his little head right there. I'm giving this a little bit of line quality on the lower side of his body. See already, it just kind of adds some life to the line. I like that. You can see something like this just takes a little bit of time. Beginning illustrators often will skip this step because they're not line geeks yet, but I tried to turn them into line geeks. That's my job. It just adds a layer of quality to your art that wouldn't exist otherwise. Now you can cheat, well, it's not cheating, but if you use that brush pen that I was showing you earlier, you can do this without having to go back over a line, which can be really nice. However, it takes some serious dexterity to be able to control one of those brushes because the best way to work them is to get up on their point, which means you're having to control it this way, not just this way. And that takes some serious muscles because that tip can wear out really quick on those brushes. Now, I've seen some people who do an amazing job using those brushes, and I have great admiration for them. In fact, the guy, I think it's Jake Parker, who started Inktober, he works like that. He works with one of those. And he has got some demo videos that are just will blow your mind. There's one about a robot, if you ever get a chance to see it. Maybe I can figure out how to link to it in this video. I'll try and figure that out. Alright, so you see, look at the difference. Look at his head versus his body. This looks like a really cheap coloring page. This is starting to look like a pen and ink drawing. So that's the difference you can get. It's also when I do my coloring pages online, I usually, well, these days I'm drawing them in Procreate, which is fantastic because I can just draw them while I'm sitting there watching TV in the evenings. But I used to use a Wacom tablet and Photoshop to make the line quality, and I get a nice ink pen in Photoshop to get my line quality for those. But it's definitely a variable line. It always has to be a variable line. Whereas I tell my students a considered line. You have to consider the line. Especially if it's going to be visible in the final art. If it's not going to be visible in the final art, if it's just a placeholder for color, that's different. But this is indeed going to be visible, so it needs to have consideration. So when I'm doing the video, I'm learning iMovie, so I'm learning how to edit this stuff. I'll probably speed up some of these processes. It's an interesting setup we've created here too. We've got two tripods. One has my iPhone hooked to it right above my drawing pad. And hopefully this will be a square on enough image that it doesn't look weird for you guys. Let me find out. See, that's a nice balanced line quality. Heavier on the bottom, lighter on the top. You can do it for the text too. This can be very meditative, especially if you're doing cross-hatching. Maybe I'll do a demo in cross-hatching for you guys one of these days. Got a whole drawing pad full of cross-hatch images. And you hear that sound that the pencil makes, or the pen? My husband says that's the sound of his wife. That's very sweet. I'm being pretty quick with this. Alright, and let's give some dimension to the petals. Again, I'm thinking light direction. But now this is twisty, so you see I'm giving a little bit of dimension where the grasses would be twisting. That'll add some nice color variation in this, because otherwise he's a very pale lizard. I'll have a little bit of pink, but with the green grasses, that'll make it pink and green. And then some aquas behind him for the water. Could be pretty. My computer has gone to sleep, but I'm going to wake it back up again when we start painting because I want to get some color inspiration from some of the images that I see of this little guy. Because he really is pretty, especially when you put him in nice aqua water and green grasses. It's a really pretty palette. Okay. All right, so now we're to step 2. So we've got step 1 all figured out. The next thing I'm going to play with is a cool little kit that I got. Now, I wanted to show you something first. These are my watercolors, and this is a fantastic little kit that you can walk around with. That's my list of colors where I like to keep them on my palette. I don't clean my palette because I put a lot of work into finding those colors, and so I'm very happy with them. And maybe I'll use that, but maybe I won't. We'll see. The other thing I want to show you is this little kit. Now, I got sent this by Pigments. This is the guy who actually makes these little kits, and he let me try it out so that I could share it with you guys, and it's pretty cool. It's called Artsy, and I'll try to put a link to it. It was not actually an easy link to get to, but you can see all the colors. And what this has that I love so much are these watercolor brushes that you can get, and these are fantastic. So you take the lid off, and you've got a brush that is forever wet because there's water in the tube. And that is a wonderful thing to be able to carry around with you and just do quick images. The others are different shapes. There's a flat one and a really small one, but the medium one is the one that I like the best. And then here's the colors. This is really cool. Check it out. The whole thing opens up. Ta-da! How groovy is that? And it clicks into place. Got a little place to tap your brush. It's got a little ring on it so you can be Mr. Art guy with your palette. Pretty cool. Yeah. All right. So that's just a really fun way to work if you want to do something like that. And yeah, we can go ahead and play with that a little bit. So I'm going to get my drawing pad out of the way so we can actually sit flat. And here we are ready to paint. Let me get that ring down. There we go. All right. So like I said, I'm looking at him in front of me. You can't see it, but he does get downright pink. And I just squeeze this and a little bit of water comes out. Yep. Now how do you get a pink when you got something that matte? You just add a ton of water, and this is where the paper towel comes in. So I definitely need a paper towel. So I want to add a lot of water to this. All right, I'm going to start with the little ear guys. I don't know if these are ears. I don't know what they are. Fins? Gills? I have no idea. I could actually use a little bit more pigment than that. One of the things I love about watercolor is you get that messy look to it. All right, my paper's getting pretty wet there, so I'm going to stop on that side and come over to this side. You can see I've got some yellow there that it's starting to bump into. It's possible it's going to start picking up some orange. Where did my pink go? There you are. I need some more. I'll let it well up in a few places so that it'll dry a little bit more opaque. Now, you have to remember, though, with watercolor, it dries much paler than it actually is when it's wet. So you want to go a little bit more saturated and then let it fade from there. All right, here's where you can blot that. I need some more wet. That's where my paper towel is going to come in even more. All right, I want very little pink in here because I'm going to, oops, that's my cord from my earphones. You can see how pale this is. Well, I hope you can see how pale this is. And one of the nice things about watercolor is that irregularity that you hit with it. I mean, the imperfections are what make it beautiful. So don't worry about messing up or having to be in lines or whatever. You want that variation in there. I mean, I hope this helps. Anybody who's a watercolor or wanting to try watercolors, they're really intimidating if you don't know about them. I certainly was intimidated by them for a very long time, but when I started really figuring it out, they're just super simple. They really are. And so I think one of the best ways to learn how to do watercolor is watch somebody else doing it. So hopefully this is reducing that wall of fear for you, and maybe you'll try and do watercolors. The big thing is using the water for blending. I'm trying to darken up the toes a little bit, fingers and toes. So there's our little guy. He's pink. All right, we're going to go with that. We'll probably come back and do another layer on this because once he dries, it's probably going to be too pale. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Let's do the green next. So we've got all these greens. I tend to love chartreuse greens. A lot of yellow in them. They just rock my socks. It's part of my personal color palette. This is something that I talk to my students quite a bit about. It's like once you figure out what colors you tend to use on a regular basis anyway, what you're drawn to, haha, you can start, it helps you develop your style. Because if you figure out what you do without thinking about it, then you can start doing it when you're thinking about it, and that will help create your look. Now, I've never drawn one of these guys before, so I don't know if I have a look for drawing these little guys, Mexican salamanders. Now that is coming across super yellow. I'm going to come in with the other side of the seaweed. So it really is like doing a ribbon. There's some blue on here. That's what might be fun to play with a little bit. And some dark green. Ooh, that's too bright. Oh my god, that is too saturated. Get rid of that. Yeah. Yuck. Okay. Don't use that one. But now I'm using an aqua. Oh, it's still too really bright. Let's see if I can bring some of this yellowy green in. Knock it down a little bit. That is still really saturated. This color. Don't you? Ooh, that's interesting. I like that. Okay. There we go. Alright. Oh, that's nice, yeah. That's a good compliment. I would believe that's a darker version of this lighter yellow. It really doesn't look green at all, that first color, does it? Especially now that you get a true green next to it. I can do some shading. So it's all mixed in there a little bit. Move this over a little bit so it's a little bit more centered for you guys. I say you guys. I don't know who's going to watch this. Hopefully I'll have some students looking at it. I hope this is not the last one I do. We'll see how this all works out. So now one of the cool things about watercolors is what you can play with when things are wet. All right, so I've already got some green in there, but my main thing right now is I just want to go down and lay down some water. I'm squeezing it out of the pen. So it's wet paper, and before it dries too much, I'm going to get some aquas in there. And just kind of let them do their thing on wet. That's one of the cool things about watercolors. You can just play with it. Trying to get it really wet. This will also start introducing the color that I want to use above by introducing it down below. So one of the big things is consistency. You don't want to just use one color in one spot and nowhere else unless that's where you want the viewer's eye to go. Okay, so now I really do want to use an aqua. So I'm going to clean my brush a little bit until it's coming clean. There we go. So here we're back into this aqua again. There we go. adding a ton of water to it, nice and thinned out. All right, how do I want to do this? I'm looking at a picture. There's a gradient of an aqua behind one that looks really nice. Maybe we could do that. So maybe we can have some aqua down low and to the left and kind of going up towards the light source. Get a little bit finicky around the letters. Now, I know some people who do watercolor, they're like, just lay it down, make it thick, you know, and it works for some people, and especially there's different methods where you would indeed want to do that. For this one, these are thank you notes, you know, they're gentle little acts of kindness, and as such, I feel like the paint should kind of be gentle too. It's all relaying a mood. The image, the paint, the drawing, everything. And if something comes in too shocky, that's what paper towels are for. Not to mention the fact they can have a really cool texture and actually put a really cool texture on your paint. I thought that was just like sacrilege when I first started doing watercolor. But if the image looks cool, who cares how you get there? For illustrators, our final is what gets reproduced, you know, for print. So whatever it takes to get you to a point that you like. Like you could come in with crayons on top of this if you wanted to. It really doesn't matter. I'm getting some little gradients under the legs. I have no pink in my wardrobe. And I've only ever bought that color like maybe once or twice in my life. Never worn it. I did my second picture book was Glitter Roll and Crazy Cheese, and it was all pink. And I wore a pink boa when I was doing book signings for that. And the mask. So see how I've got the blue at the bottom, and now I've got the blue in the mask, and it kind of all ties together. So I'm in, dealt with 3 colors here? There we go. See if I can get a little bit in the ribbons. See how that dried so light? So I'm having to go back over it. I wonder if blues do that more so than reds. Possible. Alright. So I have this nice brown here on my palette already, which I could use in the pebbles a little bit. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I like that. Ground it a little bit. You do need to mix up your saturations a little bit. Get some shadows under there. Air conditioner's done. We didn't have air conditioning in Scotland. Didn't need it. I liked that. Alright. So changing up the saturation is just kind of giving us a little punch. It's kind of like adjusting the contrast on a photo. I feel like our little guy is a little cool. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of yellow. Got some green in there, I don't want that. Yeah, just a little bit of yellow. That's one of the things about pink that drives me crazy is just how cool it is. I like salmon pinks because those are warm. See how it dries with a little texture there? Yeah, see, that's warming him up just a little bit. Just need a little around the edges. That round belly. Could go back in with the greens and do a little, or just give me the brown, a little shadow under his arms. Oh, he's getting some dimension to him. Do I want to turn Thank You into a color? It's really popping now. It's just white. I think I might just like it white. Maybe we come in with a little bit of drop shadow. Colors that we got here? No, that's too much. What's that? That's pretty loud too. I don't know, honestly. Oh, that blue with the brown's nice. Okay, that's good. That's making it pop off there a little bit. You can see I'm not staying in the lines very well. But isn't life just all about not staying in the lines? Oh, that's the logo on my website. Living life outside the lines. Alright, you know, I want just a little bit of green. These bubbles. Just carry that green up. I think this is about done. Alright, so that's going to go to my friend who made us our lovely masks. Her name's JD Donnelly, and she has a little axolotl of her own, and now she's going to have one with art too. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was inspirational to you. Maybe you'll do your own handmade thank you notes or little notes of kindness and share that with people around the world and try some watercolors and all that. Thank you for watching.